Governor, on your consent agenda today, under tab 1, you have the minutes from the last meeting. Under tab 2, you have a request for a transfer for the Department of Environmental Quality. That's a statutory transfer. Under tab 3, you have a request from the Department of Administration. That is a request for recognition of assignment of a contract. Under tab 4, you have a request from the Department of Health and Welfare. Again, that is this request for a statutory transfer. And under tab 5, you have a request from the Department of Lands. That is a request to pay overtime compensation for 2 dispatch center employees for fuel reduction activities.
Governor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented by Mr. Benjamin.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Consent agenda has been adopted. Mr. Benjamin.
You have one item on your regular agenda today. It is a request from the State Treasurer's Office. It's a request to issue tax anticipation notes for fiscal year 2026. We have the State Treasurer, Julie Ellsworth, and for bond counsel, Stephanie Bonney here.
Thank you, Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here on behalf of the State Treasurer's Office to ask for authority for, in case the State Treasurer's Office needs to issue a tax anticipation note. As the board may be aware, we use this in instances where in the first half of the year, we have greater expenditures and then we have greater revenues in the second half of the year. So it's not that the state actually needs to borrow money. It's just to match up revenue and expenditures. We're actually aren't able to determine whether it would be in the best financial interest of the state to issue those notes until late April, when we have a better idea of revenues. So at that time, the treasurer makes a determination as to whether or not to issue the note. We have not actually had to issue a note since 2021. At that, I would also point out, of course, that although the amount of the note reflects the authorization that's allowed by law, that is further limited by IRS regulations, and generally the notes for at least the past decade have never exceeded around 500 million. Any questions, Governor, gentlemen?
I assume when we vote aye, we get to sign our lives away.
That's correct, sir.
Further questions?
No questions, Governor. I guess I'll move that we approve authority for the state treasurer to issue tax anticipation notes as needed.
Okay, I second it. I'll wait just a minute so we have a more voluminous vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It's been adopted.
Thank you, Governor, gentlemen. It's okay if I approach to get
Yes,
signatures?
absolutely.
Thank you.
You got anything else, Brian?
Just on your informational agenda, you have the monthly statement from the State Insurance Fund, and that concludes your agenda.
All right.
Governor, I move we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Board of Land Commissioners will come to order. Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Governor and members of the Land Board. Just for the record, Bill Hoganson, Deputy Director for the Department of Lands, filling in for Director Miller, who is spending a few days with the family on a vacation. So happy to fill in for him. Moving into the Director's Report, timber sales. During March, the department sold 5 timber sales and 5 endowment timber sales and 1 GNA timber sale at auction. All the endowment sales that sold had competitive bidding, and that net sale value was a 69% increase over the appraised price. One sale did not sell at auction on its 3rd attempt. That sale was the Dog Shorts Ton timber sale at the Payette Lakes area, situation with relatively low volume per acre and expensive harvest system. And the economics on that one are not working right now for purchasers. We will look for a better time to market that in the future. In terms of you can see the timber sale results. The endowment sales, we sold over 12 million board feet with a net sale price of $293 per 1,000 board feet. So solid price on those. The GNA sale, about 2.5 million board feet, that sold at $67.69 per 1,000 board feet. The second table on the first page is the proposed timber sales for auction for this month. And we have over 35 million board feet proposed for auction, and the appraised value of about $7.6 million. And those sales are in progress as the month proceeds. The bottom table shows volume under contract as of the end of February. And that is 151 active contracts with 439.8 million board feet under contract, over $123 million in value. And you can see the current price of the timber under contract at $280 per thousand exceeds the 3-year average, which was about $267 per thousand. So good value on the timber under contract at this point. Moving to page 2, the timber harvest receipts in February between stumpage and interest, about $9.4 million was received, which brings us to $67.7 million approximately for fiscal year to date. We do expect about $6.8 million in March. And then we would expect in April and May for that revenue to decrease as we go through spring breakup and then pick back up again in June. Fairly normal pattern for us year to year. The next table is the status of the fiscal 25 timber sale program. You can see that we have about 220 million board feet sold, advertised, or in review. That's about 67% of the 328 million that we will offer during this fiscal year. Holes, we're at 104%. We are now routinely exceeding the 20,000 holes policy that the land board has in place. Part of that is just the scale of our timber sale program is larger than it was when that policy was put in place. So it's a fairly natural outcome to get more poles out of the larger program that we are doing now. The graph at the bottom of the page shows that we are at 107% of the 3-year average in terms of harvest receipts. And we have, excuse me, moved into the predicted range marked by the orange bars on the graph where we crossed that lower boundary. Would expect that we would head up close to where last year ended or perhaps a little higher by the end of the fiscal year. On the next page is cumulative harvest volume. We're at 104% of the 3-year average. And then down at the bottom, you'll notice that we have added lumber prices back in after that was not on the graph last month. Lumber prices represented by the green line. The red line indicates our monthly sales results, which show a lot of variability based on the individual sale characteristics. And then the blue line is our 6-month average. And you'll notice that in February of 25, the 6-month average is $282 per thousand versus February of 24 when it was $228 per thousand. So a little bit of an uptick both in lumber prices and in our stumpage prices. Unfortunately, nationally, the industry feeling seems to be that the prices increase is more due to mill curtailments in different parts of the US and in Canada than it is to the underlying demand at this time for wood. So with that, Governor, the next page is the map, the vicinity map for the timber sales. And with that, I could stand for questions on the timber portion.
Questions? Continue.
Okay. Moving on to endowment transactions, the leases and permits. The department issued 14 leases and permits, and that includes 11 land use permits during February. And then the chart at the bottom shows real estate transactions. We did acquire one easement that is with Inland Empire Paper Company to access endowment lands in 4 different counties. So we're glad to have that easement in place. We do show one deed acquired, and note that that was the deed for the property for veteran services for the cemetery. The next page is the gross non-timber revenue, the actual and the forecast. And you can see we're at about $5.1 million right now without the, before we talk about the permanent fund revenue, we're at about 5.1 million, pretty close to what we expect at this time of year. Some variability in the categories, that's fairly normal based on the timing of payments. And we expect we'll get up to our target by the end of the fiscal year. Permanent fund revenue is almost $1.8 million for this year to date. The next page is a graph of the non-timber revenue, which shows that we're tracking closely with fiscal 24 and with the 3-year average. And the page after that is the permanent fund revenue, which also shows us tracking closely with fiscal 24 and the 3-year average. And note that it's mostly sand and gravel. About 79% of the permanent fund revenue at this point is sand and gravel. And with that, I can stand for questions on that.
Questions? Continue.
Okay, Governor and Land Board members, the next item is the legislative update. Just a few things to point out there. We had 7 dockets of rules that went through this year that are through both committees in both bodies, the House and the Senate. Our budget, we had budget setting on March 14th. And then this morning we had the JFAC made a technical correction to the budget. It was a net to zero technical correction that was not included the first time it went through JFAC. It's now included and everything is okay with that. We have the House Bill 129, the Land Bank Fund, that would extend the time frame for funds in the land bank from 5 years to 10 years. That did pass the House, but in the Senate committee, it was sent to the 14th order for possible amendment. And I don't believe any changes have been made at this point to the status of that bill. S-162, state lands, has to do with leasing. That did pass the Senate, but it's pending a committee hearing in the House. No committee hearing yet in the House on that bill. Moving to the next page, House Bill 226 has to do, mines and mining has to do with the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund, changes the amount of the mine license tax which flows into that fund, and establishes an advisory committee and puts some other requirements on how that money is to be expended. That did pass in both the House and the Senate. One other one to mention that's not on the list is House Bill 389, which declares any fire on any land to be a nuisance and allows the department to abate the nuisance. That bill got through the House committee yesterday. So that's the status as we know it today. And with that, Governor, I'd be happy to stand for questions on the legislative update.
Questions?
Okay, that then brings us to item 2, the Endowment Fund Investment Board report, and Chris Halverson is here today.
Boy, we're just got our A-team here all from top to bottom, don't we? Welcome.
Good morning, Governor and Land Board members. In for Chris Anton this morning, Chris Halverson from the Investment Board, Investment Officer. In for Chris, I mentioned he's on vacation as well. The month of February, as you know, was pretty volatile. The financial markets were up and down with a lot of news and having to do with like the tariffs and consumer confidence. Throughout the volatility, we ended up down about 0.1%, not too bad, making our fiscal year return about 6.2%. As you know, volatility has continued in March. So month to date, we are down at 1.5%, making our fiscal year to date return about 4.6%. So what's going on with the markets these days? You've seen a lot of the headlines, but I'll mention a couple of things. The fear of recession has surfaced again. There's been a lot of talk on trade and tariffs and negotiations. Consumer confidence is kind of weakened by all the news that's going on in the markets as well. Spending has been off a little bit. Labor markets have been challenged a bit with some of the news and job cuts. And then kind of the big thing as it pertains in particular to tech stocks is this kind of race for AI. There's a Chinese company that was in the news that was kind of touting a cheaper solution to the AI, kind of the need for expensive chips and power. So all that kind of led to lower stock prices, in particular in tech stocks as it relates to AI. And then kind of this general lack of a steady direction in the economy as, and all this uncertainty, it's been bad for stocks. Stocks in the markets really like certainty and clarity. And I think we're going to see this volatility remain until this kind of clarity and certainty comes back, or we have a little more clarity into what's going on in the markets. There's been some good news though. International stocks have been up lately. They've been outperforming, partially because of what's talked about as this kind of industrial rebuild in Europe and the kind of more military spend. Real estate has been a kind of a bright spot too. We've had a couple good quarters where we've shown positive numbers in real estate. Kind of a point on our report, kind of a thing of interest is we hired an investment manager that's here locally, Clearwater Advisors. A lot of you are probably familiar with that firm. We hired them to manage a portion of the investments for the state insurance fund. With those comments, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Chris, those are all fixed income.
Yes, Clearwater, yes, exactly.
Further questions? Very good. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Just more green, less red, more green, less red. That's pretty simple.
Governor, that brings us to the consent agenda, and there's one item there plus the minutes. The first item is the Timber License Plate Fund, and that would be presented by Jennifer Okerlund Frederickson from the Forest Products Commission.
Welcome.
Good morning, Governor, members of the Land Board. For the record, I'm Jennifer Okerlund Frederickson, Director of Idaho's Forest Products Commission, and here to appeal to you on use of timber plate funds. The origination of those funds is from the sale, transfer, or renewal of Idaho's timber license plate. And appropriate uses for those funds are for education and reforestation. So what is being proposed today is a collective use of those funds decided by Director Miller and myself on ways that we could successfully draw down some of those funds to about $100,000 this year. What exists in the fund currently is a little over 117,000. And so this proposal before you is about $100,000 request. The first four elements are for Arbor Day, educational efforts, reforestation education. We've asked for some funding to support our famous teacher tour where we get educators out into the woods. Our opinion leader tour where we take thought leaders, lawmakers out into the woods to help educate them before they're making very important decisions about our natural resources and their use. And lastly, we do have one new request, which is $20,000 to help with educational efforts surrounding our workforce development needs within the timber industry. And Director Miller and I spoke at length about this on how to best use those funds. And we think that it's a great opportunity. And so we have asked for that use today. And if you have any specific questions on the elements, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Governor,
Go ahead.
I don't have a question so much as just a confirmation of the good tour that they put together for the teachers, the educational forest and getting educators out. I was able to be a part of that. Maybe it was not last year, but the year before. But regardless, it was really well received, and those that participated absolutely loved it.
Thank you for that. And thank you for making the time to participate. We really enjoyed having you there, and the teachers loved having you there as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Governor and Land Board members, tab 4 is the approval of the draft minutes, and that would conclude the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Been moved. We accept the consent
Second.
agenda. Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Consent agenda has been adopted.
Governor and Land Board members, there's one item on the regular agenda today that is modernizing wildland fire operations facilities, and Michelle Anderson will present that in that item.
Welcome, Michelle.
Good morning, Governor. Good morning, Land Board members. For the record, my name is Michelle Anderson, and I'm the Deputy Director for Policy and Administration for the Department of Lands. At last month's Land Board meeting, I presented a proposal about modernizing the department's fire facilities. We discussed a conceptual pre-engineered metal building design for our 9 highest need districts across the state and 3 processes for funding and implementation of that proposal. The cost estimate for the proposal ranges from $45 to $50 million. And the estimate was derived based on the bid price for our St. Joe Fire Operations Center, which is currently under construction in St. Mary's. The proposed developments range from 5,000 to just over 7,000 square feet, and none of these developments would be constructed on endowment land. The department would like to work with the Idaho State Building Authority to identify project locations, develop site-specific project agreements, understanding that there will be additional land board review and approval of the site-specific project agreements prior to execution. A concurrent resolution is required from the Idaho legislature in order for any state agency to work with the Idaho State Building Authority. A concurrent resolution does not commit the department to any expenditures. Rather, it provides an opportunity for the department to work with the ISBA to develop site-specific project proposals timelines, and improved cost estimates, which would then be presented to the land board for approval. I have a timeline that I'm going to share with you that just kind of walks through all the touch points of this process. And today I'm here before you to talk about the department pursuing a concurrent resolution to work with the ISBA. Once the department was able to get a concurrent resolution passed through the legislature, then we would be able to start the work of developing a plan with the building authority, developing what the financials would look like, come to understand what the true funding obligations would be. At this point, we would then be able to come back to the land board with a better plan of what we are wanting to do and asking the land board to approve moving forward with. We would then be able to prepare any sort of ongoing enhancement requests that we would need for funding in our budget requests, which would then also we would have to come back to the board with approval for that as well. And then would need to submit our budget, the entire package to the board for review and approval prior to submitting our budget through the next legislative session for approval. So I just wanted to be clear to articulate that there's many touch points in this process as where we would need to continue to have land board review and approval of any projects moving forward. And that currently we are just asking the approval from the board to get started with having that conversation with the state building authority.
So Michelle, contrary to what this says, you're not going to ask for concurrent resolution this session.
We had originally hoped, Governor, members of the land board, we had originally hoped to do so. We had hoped that we would be having this conversation earlier in the session. It is now, I understand the legislature is trying to wrap up the session, and the probability of being able to pull that off this year is pretty slim. However, having this conversation now and having the land board's approval to move forward positions us for the next session that we would be ready to start that legwork and that hard work of moving forward on that.
Questions? Go ahead. Superintendent.
If the board is agreeable to moving forward on the resolution and you think there is an opening to get it done this year, and I agree, it looks like they're wrapping up. I mean, it doesn't keep you from what we do today. If there's time, you can, but you're not trying to cram it in. It's just whatever the natural timeline would be.
Governor, Superintendent, land board members, that's correct. We're not trying to cram anything in. We're just trying to be prepared that when the opportunity presents itself, that we can move forward.
Thank you. I could have used a more professional than cram.
Governor. I guess, one, I just want to be on the record that I question that they're trying to wrap up.
Has your budget passed?
Yeah, I don't think all of our budgets haven't passed yet, as a matter of fact. So, I guess, but knowing that I get the timing of the question now, but knowing that it wouldn't be for a year or whatever, 10 months from now that we'd do the concurrent resolution, I guess. It seems like knowing there's going to be that additional time, I don't know if we need to pursue this at the moment in terms of this, because I think there are other approaches that maybe we could take. And I will say from where I sit, I have this lingering, like, is this the highest priority? I do know our facilities need attention, but in terms of our fire response, how does this rank in terms of the funding and spending? And so given that looking at your steps that you've provided, knowing that the concurrent resolution will be the next step and it's not for a year, I just wonder if it warrants more conversation rather than just approving this at this point in time. So I guess that's more commentary than question.
Superintendent.
Thank you. I guess as a comment related to what our Secretary of State is saying, I don't have a problem approving the resolution if this kicks off a process of investigation and more conversation. If that's what this is about and that's how I read it, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it doesn't tie our hands into anything. And so for that, if it helps you move down the road more when we come back and you have more information so we can have a more full discussion. I'm fine with the timing, even if it's a little bit longer getting to the legislature.
And Governor, maybe a question actually this time. I do think I agree with the superintendent in the sense that I don't have any heartburn like this is going to cause harm as you outlined, I guess. Are there other approaches beyond the ISBA that have been explored or might be explored in terms of how this would be funded?
Governor, Secretary of State, Land Board members, there are other alternatives as we discussed last month that could be explored as well. As part of the process of working with ISBA is in order to actually understand better what that process would look like, we would need to have a concurrent resolution to kind of have those discussions. However, that said, it does not preclude us from pursuing a different option as well. And while we're proposing today, we're saying we have these, $45 to $50 million of needs. That could very well change. We have other needs we recognize as well. And so as we dig into this more, the department may need to say, you know what, maybe not this, maybe it should be half of this, maybe it should look something different. We're just trying to give you a estimation of what we know now and what we're thinking, recognizing that that is going to firm up with better detail down the road.
Thank you.
Bill, you got anything to add?
Governor, I would just add, maybe to the Secretary of State's question, we do plan to bring the next version of our fire strategic plan to the Land Board next month, and a chance to engage with all of you on what we see as the direction for the fire program and see if that's in alignment with what the Land Board sees. A good check-in point.
Well, my learned instinct is to ask the legislature to pass a concurrent resolution that we're going to borrow $40 million, and then there's going to be, and that thing about borrowing money from bankers, you have to pay them back. And so somewhere the money has to show up to pay them back. And I think we better know site by site the specific needs. I'm just not comfortable with saying we're going to borrow. We want to start the process of borrowing $40 and $50 million. I'm sure the staff, your fire, the internal staff, but for us, I think we need to have a little more comfort on the dire need for it, because when you start the concurrent, and we can engage the building authority. I know a couple of people over there. We can work with them and the others, but I just, until we know every single, because you're literally building a new fire site at all the older fire sites, and you can't do it on endowment land. There might be places where an ideal building comes up for a fraction of what it would cost to build new. I just think we need to put a few more legs under this proposal before we start the process of borrowing the money. I would guess the legislature would be very, very reluctant to borrow $40 million, because from their position, they got every other agency that wants to do the exact same thing. And if they do that, where do they stop? So I would just suggest and ask the staff to find and at least get it to us, fine tune the request on a facility by facility in a priority standpoint, and then say, if a facility comes up, and of course, these fire facilities have got to be put in certain places to where your response time. The BLM just made an agreement with the city of Eagle because their response time from out by the airport to a fire north of the Boise Valley is so slow during the rush hour that they're frankly totally inefficient. So where we're going to put them, what we're going to put them, what else we'd be open to, where we might cooperate with a rural fire department. I think those are all things that, the staff may understand it, but I think we land board members need to have a little higher comfort before we go ask the legislature to loan us $45 million that we're gonna have to pay back. They're gonna have to be you're basically asking for a continuous appropriation to make those payments. And they are not excited about doing continuous appropriations.
Governor, I guess just comment, I think just to echo a little bit, given where we are in the timeframe of the legislative session, and I mean, my somewhat silly remark about them trying to leave, the budget is one of the things driving a lot of this because there's a lot of wrangling, and I think that echoes what the governor has said. My recommendation is that, and I guess I'll make it as a motion, that we hold this proposal. We can continue the conversation, get the update that Bill mentioned, and just hold it at the call of the chair.
All right. We got a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? You guys have it. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
We're not saying no. We're saying we need more information.
I appreciate that.
Bill?
Governor, that concludes today's agenda.
Waiting for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.